It's a controversial debate here on the left about the link between U.S. foreign policy and Islamic terrorism. Now, many believe that the United States' expansive role in the Middle East has been the driving force that is creating and maintaining these terrorist groups. Now, many also believe that Islamic terrorism is just purely ideology, and the United States foreign policy has little if no role in all of these Islamic terror attacks. However, like most things, I believe the reality is nuanced and isn't just one way or the other way, but it's a mix of both positions. Now, since World War II, the United States has intervened in a ridiculously long list of countries. Greece, the Philippines, Puerto Rico, Korea, Iran, Lebanon, Vietnam, Cuba, Laos, and this is only a portion of the list. I can go on and on here. We have over 900 military bases across the world, and we spend nearly more on our military than the rest of the world combined, nearly. And during the Obama administration, we have been involved in Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Yemen, Libya, Pakistan, and Syria. And in each of these countries, the facts are, once we get involved, instability ensues or simply worsens. In Iraq, we decide to intervene in this country, hunting for invisible weapons of mass destruction. 200,000 innocent civilians killed. The major source of stability in the region is gone, and it creates the open field that ISIS needs to become the terror group it is today. In Libya, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama make the decision to intervene as the Arab Spring was sweeping across that country, and the Libyan government, yes, was committing atrocities against protesters. But Gaddafi is ousted as dictator, and within the next year or two, terrorists and other rebel groups are fighting amidst the chaos in Libya. Again, I can go on and on and on here. The trend has been, over the last 70 years, that whenever the United States launches a military intervention, chaos many times ensues in that particular region. It is definitely counterproductive, and not to mention a tremendous waste of the United States' money and resources. And when the United States foreign policy creates chaos and slaughters civilians, yes, you will see a spike in Islamic terrorism because you killed their friends and family. And the groups that were already there in the region, they were able to expand because you created political instability. I'll even give you specific cases. Already mentioned Iraq, how the gaping hole that was left there and all the senseless violence gave rise to ISIS. In Afghanistan, the United States gives money and weapons to a group of Islamic radicals fighting the Soviet Union back in the 80s called Mujahideen. They use our weapons and our financial support to become the crazed jihadists that we know today, Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. In Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, the United States has killed scores of civilians in our recent drone strikes, and across Afghanistan in recent drone strikes, nearly 90% of people killed were civilians. Number one, that is unacceptable, that we are funding these atrocities with our tax dollars. But number two, all of this creates more Islamic terrorists than we destroy. But obviously, let's be very clear here, the United States is not solely responsible for Islamic terrorism, because the very ideology that these terrorists follow, it's been around for centuries. Wahhabism, which is simply fundamentalist Islam, it has been around since the 1700s. It originated in Saudi Arabia, and through the Saudi kingdom's dominance throughout the region, the ideology was able to be preserved throughout the Middle East. A fundamentalist Islam is obviously the ideology terrorist groups follow and they use to justify the attacks they carry out. It was present in the Middle East long before the United States even became an independent nation. And in the cases of many Muslim nations across the Middle East, where the United States has not intervened and has not created chaos and instability, all sorts of terrible things still persist. There is little regard for social justice in terms of women's rights and gay rights, and amazing levels of economic inequality occur, where these oil sugar daddies are hoarding all the wealth. And some of these countries even support terrorist efforts. There's been so much controversy about Saudi officials giving money to ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and of course Iran supporting Hezbollah. These countries are still in the same ballpark of Islamic fundamentalism and terrorism as countries where the United States creates chaos. So to blame most, if not all of this situation on U.S. foreign policy itself, that's simply false. It is nuanced. It's a spectrum for each specific country across the Middle East. So to just sum it up, Islamic fundamentalism, the ideology these terrorists follow, it's been around for centuries. And in many countries where the U.S. has not intervened, it still plays a major role. And overall, these countries are still crappy. But the US has a history of making the situation worse in the countries it does become involved in. So the solution, the Middle East right now is a region of absolute chaos, even without the United States intervening, and it's only going to get worse if we do get involved. So you know what? Instead of getting involved, let the fight that's going on right now for the soul of Islam that's happening all across the Middle East, let that fight play out. I understand the urge to try to be the world policeman and micromanage all the world's affairs and try to tame those world affairs, but the reality is that nearly every time we get involved, the situation only worsens and more terrorists are created.